Friends and family, welcome, whether you are joining us in person or online. Welcome to this special service celebrating the life of Helen Lindsay. My name is Sarah Lindsay, and I'm the minister here at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood, and it is truly an honor to be part of this service commemorating Helen's wonderful life. In our time together this afternoon, we will have the opportunity to remember, to mourn, to cry, and to celebrate the life that Helen lived, all the ways that she touched each of our lives. A special welcome this morning to Helen's three sons, Rob, Dave, and John, and her grandchildren, Zoe, Gabriel, Jonah, and Elias, and her great-granddaughter, Ella. Welcome to all of you who feel the pain of Helen's passing. Her life impacted all of us. And today we affirm that she will live on in the minds and hearts of those who knew and loved her. Death brings us together with the need to honor the life of a beloved mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, aunt, friend, fellow congregant, and champion for justice. While we wish we could be as one in person and online, all of us together, so that we could hold each other's hands and offer each other hugs, we are grateful for the opportunity to gather through technology from the far reaches of this world so that we can witness to each other's grief and tell the story of Helen's humanity. May we each find comfort in the embrace of this loving community. In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we open our services with a chalice lighting. The chalice is a symbol of hope, of light in the darkness. It also symbolizes the spark in each of us, the best in each of us, the vast humanity contained within our mortal bodies. Today, we'll light our chalice together as a symbol of Helen's spark, and it will represent for us through our time together the life she lived and the love she gave. We're going to light our chalice with the words that we use every Sunday here at Helen's beloved congregation. They are in your order of service, so you can join along behind your mass and at home. As you say them with us, know that these were the words Helen spoke each Sunday, and that she took to heart in her decades of participation in this community. We light this chalice for the light of truth. Cynthia will be offering a reading.
Civil rights leader John Lewis was Helen's hero. The following is from an essay published shortly after his death last year. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state. It is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we called the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. You must also study and learn the lessons of history because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. People on every continent have stood in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change, And that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. Continue to build union between movements stretching across the globe, because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence is the more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war.
Helen Poland was born on June 25th, 1925 in Queens, New York. She was the youngest of Orville and Amy's children. When Helen was 2, the family moved to Reading, Massachusetts, where Helen grew up near her uncle and grandfather and some chickens. I'm told she had the egg root. She had to go collect all the eggs. Helen loved to play with her older brothers, Ozzie and Sherman. She and Sherman were especially close. He would tease her in that way older brothers do, and she both loved and hated it. Helen was a tomboy, always physical, keeping up with her older brothers. Her love of tennis started young and lasted her whole life long. So too did her understanding of the value of both education and social justice. Helen went to Bryn Mawr, a period I'm told that she enjoyed. She made many friends, including her lifelong friend, Jackie Levine. Although Helen would have loved to be a tennis pro, she ended up studying economics. By her own admission, there wasn't really a long-term plan for that study, but she enjoyed it enough that she went on to work for Professor Hansen at Harvard. Getting that position took a little bit of doing. Her sons told me that Helen actually got a secretary job in the political science department and then sort of worked her way over to the economics department to work with Professor Hansen. She enjoyed her time there, and after a year or so, the young men started coming back from war, back to school, and among them was Bob Lindsay. He was a grad student in the economics department back from the Navy, and he and Helen met and fell in love. They were married in 1951, and throughout their whole marriage, Helen and Bob got along so well. Her sons actually joked that in some ways, the calm strength of that relationship left them unprepared for the typical ups and downs of a normal relationship. After the wedding, Helen and Bob moved around a bit and then landed on Staten Island for a while. In 1955, Rob was born and Dave arrived in 1957. In 1959, they moved here to Ridgewood, where Helen lived for over 60 years. In 1960, Jack was born. Ridgewood had been appealing because of the schools and the lifestyle. Helen was staying home with the boys, but in addition to raising them, as you all know, she was engaged in activism and political work. She was intimately involved in the League of Women Voters, serving as the president of the Ridgewood chapter and then vice president of the New Jersey branch. She also became involved with the Education Law Center, where she served on the board for many decades, and we'll hear more about that later. Helen and Bob had become Unitarians somewhere along the way, so that when they arrived here to Ridgewood, they already knew they wanted to come here to the society. They joined, and Helen stepped into leadership. And Reverend Terry is with us to say more about that time.
Helen was the most committed activist for peace and justice that I have ever known. With her allies, like the Bodlanders and others on the committee of that name, she organized and saw through a whole range of initiatives during my entire ministry in Ridgewood. What stands out most for me now is just one example is the Veterans Peace Convoy that came through on its way to Nicaragua, collecting needed humanitarian supplies during the Contra War. Our hosting of them and our efforts to raise money and donations on their behalf earned this congregation the respect and affection of those vets, trying to do something compassionate in the world. And Helen was right in the midst of it all. On that and so many other occasions, I watched Helen collecting pledges of one kind or another during coffee hours. One-on-one, face-to-face, she asked people. She may have learned that from the League of Women Voters, which she also led, or maybe it was just Helen. But it worked so well that I've remembered it and used it ever since. Coffee hour was like a huge field of opportunity for her. Helen had an organizing genius. As minister, all I had to do was agree with the committee that something was a valuable project that they had brought up, and Helen was off to make it real. For years, she kept this society active, living out its central values in real time. Plus, just one other example, she and Delight Dodick ran an incredibly successful fundraising campaign for a building project. And on it goes. Needless to say, she was sharp as a tack and adept at presenting her case. When I mentioned this ability of hers to her, she said that growing up in her family, They had been solid ACLU supporters, and the dinnertime conversations involved a lot of political and ethical and socially conscious talk and issues. Everyone, kids included, were invited to join in, but you had to be able to support your case. Opinion required facts and logic to be accepted around that table. However explicit that policy was or not, she picked up on it early and carried it out for the rest of her life. But it wasn't just her skill set that stands out for me. It was her heart. She felt the human side of injustice, and it moved her to action. In this, she was perfectly matched with her husband, Bob, who also brought a big heart to his profession of business ethics and commitment to ethical living in general. What a couple they made together, with their hearts and their minds, their mutual affection and support. I assume dinner conversations were along the line of Helen's childhood home somewhat, because all three of their sons have carried on, each in his own way, this family social conscience. And God knows this earth has great need for families such as the Lindsay Paulings. The kind of ethical and compassionate heart and mind that Helen and hers lived out, and still are, is indeed like the nourishing tree planted by the waters, or water in the desert, or a helping hand in time of need.
Indeed, Rob, Dave, and John told me that Helen traced her activism to her own childhood family. Her father had been president of the ACLU in Massachusetts, and her mother had herself volunteered with the League of Women Voters. When Helen's own volunteering with the League ended, she spent some time lobbying for the Girl Scouts, among others. She always found a way, whether it was out in the world or here at USR, to pursue her passion for justice and activism, and to be a leader among those trying to change this world. Helen's sons told me that as a mom, Helen made sure to expose them to different activities, but she didn't try to force them into any particular direction. She left room for them to do their own things, find their own passions, even if she didn't always understand those passions. Helen was not particularly effusive, verbally or physically, but her sons absolutely knew that she loved them. And her friends absolutely knew that she supported them, loved them, and would stand by them. Helen was honest and earnest. She didn't have ulterior motives or agendas. And Helen was smart, funny in her own subtle way. Each of us, I'm sure, had the pleasure of being on the receiving end of Helen's quiet humor and that smile. Her sons told me that she came up with nicknames for them all, and this delighted me. Rob was Honey Bunny, Dave was Funny Bunny, I think I got this right, John was Sunny Bunny, and Bob was Money Bunny. Helen held herself to a high standard, and she held the world to a high standard too. She had a vision of what this world could be, and she fought for that vision through a lifelong commitment to community building and justice work. So after her children had left home, Helen just dove even deeper into her commitments and communities. She remained an avid reader of news and history and social issues, almost entirely nonfiction, throughout her life. She loved to keep up with the world. When I last saw her, she talked to me about some John Lewis that she was reading. When Bob retired, they spent some time traveling, and in her over 9 decades, Helen actually saw a lot of the world. And while that travel may have affirmed and solidified her understanding of what happens across this globe and her desire to improve it, her great passion remained family, friends, the life she built, and the world she could see. Helen loved her sons so much and was so proud of you. That was clear in every conversation I had with her when she would tell me about what you were up to. And she loved and was proud of her grandchildren too. Last time I saw her, she gave me the rundown on what everyone was doing, and you could see in her eyes how much she loved you. I'm told that Helen was raised primarily in the religion of the Democratic Party, though the family was nominally Methodist. Helen was an avowed atheist, a staunch humanist, and she didn't really love to talk about spiritual and metaphysical things. Though as she got older, her son said she did talk more about dying. Her belief that when these two brief lives of ours end, they end. And she wasn't afraid. Helen approached much of her life and her relationships intellectually. But if you were lucky enough to be in Helen's orbit, even if she didn't speak those emotions, you knew, because her actions spoke. You knew where she stood, and you knew where you stood with her. When Helen's beloved Bob died, Helen took a bit of a pause. And then for her 70th birthday, her family threw a big surprise party. Ask them about it because it sounds amazing. And it brought new life into Helen. It started a new chapter with renewed energy. And by the time I arrived here to USR, Helen was already in her early 90s. She'd moved into her rightful place as beloved elder and revered founder. Helen was, to me, so obviously a woman of strength, wit, commitment, passion, and solidity. It was a privilege to get to know her even the little bit that I did. And Helen was here every Sunday. Even when she moved to the cupola, friends would bring her here so she could sit in these chairs, look at this Vilonis installation, these windows that she loved, and be present to her community. And even when we moved online, Helen was there, present to us all every Sunday. Helen will be so deeply missed by our congregation, by each of us. Helen died on August 10th, surrounded by family, surrounded by love, and she leaves a legacy from which we all can learn.
I graduated in 1947. It was shortly after the war. I'd been to a women's college, and I had not seen very many men during the war, although essentially I had not seen very many men. And I had studied economics when I was in college.
Sorry.
They weren't around. And it was an era when women were supposed to get married. They weren't supposed to have a career. What I wanted to do was to work for Alvin Hansen, who was the leading Keynesian in this country, and I had studied him and I had read his books. And he was working at Harvard. And I thought, that's what I'd like to do. That's not something that people would aspire to now, because it wouldn't be enough of a job forward for a woman. But at that time, and in fact it could have been, at that time that's what I wanted to do. So I went to Harvard and applied for a job in the political science department. Had a great advantage. I kept seeing a lot of men. They were just out of they were just out of the service and going back to graduate school and serious about their studies. And they hadn't seen women either. So I dated a lot of men and had a very good time. And there were other people other women in the building that were my age who were doing the same thing. And so we had groups of men and women. And by the time I met your father, your grandfather, he was a member of the, tell me what it was, Marching and Chowder Society, and they were all graduate students. They said that they had to, if any of the professors asked them an embarrassing questions, the other ones had to cough. And one of them got caught with something that he didn't know the answer to, and I think one of the members coughed, and he this guy chastised everybody else for not coughing. But, you know, it was a good time. You know, had a really good time, and I had a good time because we went out together and we did things together very casually, and it was a great time. So we had a lot of family stuff here, and getting together was very meaningful to have, and it still is, to have different parts of the family come together and do things together. I've forgotten all the things we did. I know we played hearts. And when Sherman when we went to bed, Sherman was in the bedroom up above me, and he dropped one shoe, knowing that I was in a room downstairs, and he didn't drop the second shoe. The next day, he dropped 3 shoes. And he was doing it explicitly to make me notice, which I did. So we had a good relationship, Sherman and I.
A person's life can never be told in one voice as one story. So this afternoon, members of Helen's family, as well as friends and colleagues, will share remarks. Some are here in person, some online. And we will begin with Peg and Ella, who are joining us via Zoom.
Hey, everybody. This is Peg. I'm Rob's wife and Helen's daughter-in-law, and I am here with Ella. You say hello?
Hi.
And we'd just like to speak for a couple of minutes about Helen and her devotion, her utter devotion to family. Ella, what would you like to say about Grandma Helen?
I liked Grandma Helen.
Was she fun?
Mhm.
Yeah, you guys played together. Do you remember playing with a balloon in her room? We saw pictures of that.
Not really playing with the balloon in her room, but I kind of remember it from the picture.
Yeah, from the picture. Is there anything else you'd like to say about Grandma Helen?
I loved her very much.
That's a good thing to say. So Helen was always concerned. When we saw Helen every summer, we saw her after Bob died almost every Christmas. And she was always somebody who was so interested in her grandchildren. And she loved to talk to them and to find out that little thing which maybe they were interested in. And she would always find just the perfect gift for them in a book that tied up either what they were interested in or something that maybe they both were interested in. I remember one of her first presents to Ella was a toy dog. And you saw many photos today of Helen with dogs. She absolutely adored dogs. So she always found some really unique way to make connections with her grandchildren. And I know Zoe in particular used to call Helen a lot, and they would just talk about everything. And she often would call to get Helen's opinion about something and advice. Helen also was a careful listener, and she knew just the right thing to say. To set them on their way. And she was always ready to tell you about the amazing things that every grandchild was doing, from music to drawing to being interested in science or just whatever they were interested in. So she will be for sure missed in their lives. And we love her, right? Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Sorry, masks do really weird things to our beard. So I've been trying to think about this I'm trying to find a word for something. This quality mom had that's like, maybe it's persistence. Maybe you were, Sarah and Terry were talking about, mom as a fighter. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's loyalty. Some place where all these things come together, where you find something you really care about and you stick to it and you're behind it forever. And some things just never changed over her 96 years. She told me this one story, and she told all of us these stories. We heard a lot about her childhood. But she loved the Red Sox, but she didn't have very much money. So for weeks, she would not take the streetcar home. She'd walk home, which maybe was a couple miles, and save 5 cents every day. And after a couple months, she had enough for a ticket. She went, and she was just this plan. It's like, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to keep repeating it. At some point, she decided Bobby Dorr was her favorite player. And 75 years later, Bobby Dorr was her favorite player. She thought about writing to him when she was 94. There's just these things about her that just kind of kept going through her life like that. Peg mentioned her love of dogs. She really loved dogs. We heard these stories all the time. When she was growing up, her parents had a kennel. And so there were all these dogs in the house all the time. They all had personalities. It was all very important to know who was who, at least as important as the people. Years later, I would be walking down Maple Avenue with her, and she knew people by the dogs they had. She might not remember the people's names at all, but oh, that's Gulliver. That's his person, and that's where they live. And she really knew it. The minute somebody walked in with a dog into a room, she was instantly aware of it. She knew that dog was there, and she was instantly also sort of scheming, like, how can I kind of maneuver myself over to casually introduce myself to this dog so that I get to know them? And so I'd been thinking about all this stuff, and then I discovered that some of this is actually in Mom's words too. Discovered actually this morning, this book that she wrote, she must have been, I don't know, 8 or 9, called The Dog Book. And so it's got chapters. Each one has a page. So chapter 1 is Be Kind. Be kind to dogs. If you know them, talk to them. Do not pick it up if you do not know them. If a dog comes to your house with a cut, please fix it. I felt like this is just like the rest of her life is like that, right? If there's a problem, you should fix it. I don't think I will attempt to sing this song, but there is a song in here. If you're a doctor or anybody else in your house, have him fix a cut if any dog comes to your house. A theme. If he or she is out, you yourself will have to try to fix it. So it's on you. And that whole kind of like combination of things, just really, I don't know, somehow summed up this quality she had, be like sticking to things. Maybe it's sort of having dog nature of some sort, and just sticking to things and being loyal, following through, always being there for everybody. And supposedly all dogs go to heaven. I don't really remember a time when I didn't know that Mom wasn't an atheist. I think that was just a fact. We just always knew it. But hypothetically, if she was in heaven, I'm sure she's surrounded by Cocker Spaniel puppies.
So give us 1 second because we're having technical situation. Olas, if you can hear me, you can queue up David, but we're going to hold on for 1 second.
So David is queued on the Zoom on my end.
No, yeah, I know that you all are seeing it fine. We're just not seeing it in this space. So give us 1 second to see if we can bring it back so that everyone who's here can see David. although perhaps we can hear him, which could be enough for now. Okay. David, can you speak for a second?
I can.
Okay, we
Good
can hear
afternoon,
you.
everyone.
You can go ahead. We can hear you. Sorry and thank you.
Great. Again, good afternoon, everyone. John has asked me to speak about Helen's extended service as a board member of Education Law Center, and also to speak about our relationship together as we became personal friends over many years. When John asked me to speak, he asked how many years had Helen been on the Education Law Center board, and I actually didn't know the precise number. But then he told me that she came on the board when Marilyn Morehouser became executive director. So we figured around 1976. So we settled on about 40 years as a trustee of the Law Center. Helen gave 4 decades of an extraordinary commitment to Education Law Center and its mission of improving public education for children, not just in New Jersey, but across the nation, especially children at risk from poverty, disability, racial segregation, and other societal inequities. Helen was a trustee of the Law Center for my entire tenure as executive director. And I first met Helen on my first day at ELC in 1996. She and Mary Nash were waiting at the door for me at our small office in downtown Newark. ELC was literally on the verge of closing its doors. And Helen went to work and rolled up her sleeves to save ELC on day one, and then over many years to grow our advocacy program through her last day on the board. Helen did everything. No task was too small, from helping me to clean out Marilyn Morehouser's office, to licking stamps and addressing envelopes for emergency funding appeals, to giving generously from her own personal funds, to recruiting new board members, supporters, and donors, to making new staff and new board members feel at home and welcome, to bringing on a consultant to help navigate the organization through some particularly trying times, to support the decision we made to expand ELC's advocacy program beyond New Jersey to states across the country. And I can't forget to mention the community discussions that she organized in this very sacred space to discuss education inequity and injustice. Throughout her long service at ELC, Helen exhibited extraordinary characteristics. She was a powerful force, but in a very quiet way. She was not interested in tooting her own horn. She really even didn't have any interest in being thanked. She was completely selfless, generous, kind, but she was tough and utterly reliable when needed. And she didn't miss any of our ELC events, fundraising and other events, braving New Jersey's roads to get there, and often with Mary Nash, and usually with Paul and Delight Dodick in tow. Helen was rock steady. I so cherish her quiet, strong presence when I had to give speeches, make presentations, raise difficult issues at board meetings, or talk to the press. For me, she was a constant source of sanity, dignity, and comfort, reminding me to maintain focus and resolve on what mattered. I deeply miss her counsel and wisdom. But most of all, I will remember Helen for her passion for the cause of education and racial justice. She reveled in Education Law Center's many courtroom successes in the Abbott case. But she was even more energized by the successes those court decisions brought to the lives of New Jersey's most disadvantaged children, from new school buildings to well-funded schools, to giving thousands and thousands of youngsters the chance to attend quality preschool. Helen's service improved the lives of generations of children living on the margins of our society. We all owe her gratitude for a life well lived. I know I speak for everyone in the ELC family and our community, our supporters, for the staff and the board, and many of those who served in that positions previously, all of whom Helen touched over her many years of service. We are all honored and blessed to have known Helen and to have had the opportunity to work alongside her for the common good.
It is my privilege to be able to speak to you about Helen's work in social justice here at USR. I will share some of the recollections of the many people who have worked with and been mentored by Helen. They all reflect on her strong social justice spirit. Her impact on people was extraordinary. One of the people I asked about Helen said she had an unwavering commitment to social justice. She was a trailblazer ahead of her time. Everybody who worked with Helen saw her as their mentor. As somebody else said, what I loved most about Helen was that even though she had strong views of her own, she was always willing to entertain dissenting views. During peace and justice meetings, when Helen was chair, there were very extensive discussions. She never put anyone off or showed signs of disrespect. She believed in persuasion and was a model of great leadership. So what causes did Helen work on and support through the 60s through the 80s? She was deeply involved in the peace movement. Helen was our first envoy in the mid-60s to the UUA UNO envoy program, representing the congregation. I bet most of us did not know that. She worked on racial justice with Roland Anderson and was known to many in the Black community in Ridgewood. This and more information is in Doris Armstrong's book. Going forward, we all remember her extensive work as she chaired the Peace and Justice Committee. She co-hosted a Ramadan supper with the Muslim Society of Ridgewood. When Bergen County Sanctuary Committee was formed, Helen was one of the first representatives from USR and was vice president of the Sanctuary Board for 10 years. In 1987, Helen focused on Central America. The committee work led to the Society's sponsorship of John's work in Central America. She went to Nicaragua and Guatemala. She returned to Guatemala under the auspices of the Peace Brigades International. Through her work in Open Hearts, Open Doors, Helen worked on racial justice, culminating in the writing of our anti-racism statement, which is on our wall. She, Bob, and two other couples in November 1988 at a lay service entitled "These Are Our Children," spoke about parents being parents of gay children and their loving acceptance of their children's gay partners. She was one of the founders of the Welcoming Committee. During the time of the Social Responsibilities Council, Helen always supported all of our committees. I especially remember her support of the Education Justice Committee, where she was extremely helpful due to her extensive knowledge of education law, as you just heard. She was very excited when the congregation proposed in 2012 UUA General Assembly that reproductive justice would be a congregational study action issue, especially when we won. I worked closely with Helen from 2011 to 2013. Prior to that, the council had been faltering a bit, so she stepped in as chair and I became co-chair. She was clear that she needed my help to navigate the intricacies of email and other computer issues. In exchange, I had the wonderful opportunity to work closely with Helen. And of course, I learned more from Helen than she from me. While she was never negative about the new modes of communication, she made it clear that the old ways were preferable. She knew how to work a room at coffee hour. Who could say no to a direct face-to-face appeal, she'd say. More to the point, who could say no to Helen Lindsay? I'm not sure she realized it was she who got people to say yes, not necessarily what the ask was. When Helen could no longer chair committees, she joined the Racial Justice Committee and contributed for as long as she was able. Until her last months, her question to me when I visited or called was always, "So what's going on in the congregation, Carol?" My answer now is, Helen, a lot is going on, and much of it is attributed to your work and the mentoring that you did. I miss you.
Hello, everyone. It looks like they had to restart the system over there, so just be patient and we'll be back online in a few seconds.
For me, Grandma was always the person that I could talk to, and we didn't always talk about anything special. Usually we just talked about books or my daughter Ella, or she would tell me stories from her childhood. She would always ask if Ella was reading and what Ella liked to read. And then she would tell me a story about my dad in kindergarten wanting to read every single time. But for me, she was always really reassuring to talk to. Like my mom said, she always knew the right thing to say. When my husband and I wanted to get married, but neither of us wanted a wedding, and we knew that our families would want something, Grandma was the person that I called. And she told me, why don't you just go down to City Hall and get married, and then we'll celebrate it in Blue Hill in the summer. And I did. We followed her advice. She did always know the right thing to say. And in the past few years, Grandma and I made it kind of a promise to each other. We talked to each other every week, almost every week, either I called her or she called me. And you could always hear the joy in her voice when she answered the phone. She was just so happy to talk to you. And when you saw her in person, you could see the joy in her face. You could feel, whether you were talking to her, whether you were with her, you could feel her love for you. And I'm so grateful that my daughter got to meet her and that she got to meet my daughter. And I will really miss her, and I'll miss her voice. And I will never, ever forget her laugh.
I didn't really know what to write for this. I mean, what can you say about a woman who has gone from meeting Eleanor Roosevelt to living a life that can encompass all of us? But two things stood out to me when I was thinking about this. The first was a train trip I took with my grandma. I must have been 9 or 10, and we took the Amtrak from Portland to Boston. And being 9 or 10, I had just discovered how to play gin rummy. And for 2 or 3 hours, we played gin rummy. She did not let me win once, which I can attribute to her innate sense of fairness. But every single time, with grace and kindness and love, she explained to me very gently why I lost. I did not think there was a mean bone in her body. And the second thing was her laugh. She was not a very emotionally flamboyant or demonstrative person always, but she had a beautiful laugh. And I think it snuck up on her often. I think it took her by surprise, which made it even funnier. And I remember the day that she passed. All day I heard that laugh.
My friend Chris Cannon reminded me of the many ways Mom supported me as a kid, letting me fill the garage with newspapers for a recycling drive, letting me fill the freezer with Kool-Aid ice cubes that I would sell at Little League games, encouraging me to plant a pumpkin patch. She and League of Women Voters members also recruited me to assemble newsletters around the dining room table. We think of her organizing, but the encouragement she gave in so many other things was seamless. When I was very ill at age 13 and had lost more than 30 pounds, she and Dad took turns letting me sleep in their bed for a summer until I recovered. That kind of love burns strong. We laughed together easily and often. One cold winter day when I was a kid, it was too cold to go out. We made lemonade sat in the living room and imagined that we were in the Caribbean looking at the sea. In wintry moments, the pleasure of that idea still sustains me. When I came out as gay to her and Dad, what seemed hardest for her was that I might be stigmatized, less recognized, that it would hurt me. And she didn't understand. Later, she said she realized that she didn't need to understand. She only needed to accept, and she could love me, maybe even more for who I am. What I saw her do and learned from was the value of studying something in order to act on it. Less than a year after Dad died, she, I, and 15 others traveled to Guatemala and Mexico on a human rights delegation, which was truly beautiful. When she lost the point, when Dad died, when memory failed her, she folded it back and kept going to find the joy, the connection, the winning, the learning. I saw her do that. We saw her. Today, despite the technology challenges, I know there are people participating from Norway, California, Mexico, Maine, other parts of New Jersey, many other places, the people here in this room. People say, I'm sorry for your loss, yet it is our loss, since this is a community that she helped to build. So I encourage you, again, to do something good in her memory, something true, something of love, for social justice, to connect people, something that is physical and uses your mind, and to start doing it now. These are values I learned from her. With her, I felt we were rowing in the same direction, like boys in the boat in sync. The boat won't be the same without her, nor the rowing, but we still have an amazing team right here that she did so much to grow. Bye, Mom. We will keep rowing for you.
Helen was a deeply cherished friend. When we moved to Ridgewood with two preschool daughters in the late 1960s, she was a leader in the League of Women Voters of Ridgewood, where I first met her. We had similar family and educational backgrounds, but she was several years older and seemed to have a world of insight into family and community affairs. In the League, her positions on local and state government affairs were always thoroughly researched and thoroughly constructed. And if Helen advocated a decision, you knew it was the right thing to do. So it bore weight with me when she suggested one day that Paul and I, lapsing Episcopalians, might think about visiting the Unitarian Society. She welcomed us to the society where she and Bob had been active for many years and had been especially involved with the UUA's work on behalf of Black inclusion and agency in the denomination. Early in the 1970s, she and Bob invited us to join their couples book group. An immediate bond formed when Paul discovered that she had worked with Alvin Hansen, a famous Keynesian economist on the faculty at Harvard that you've heard about, and that's where she and Bob met. Many conversations ensued over the years about economics and student life in Cambridge. That book group read nonfiction mainly and endured for decades. There were shifts in its makeup now and then, but after Bob passed away, Helen stayed with the group and for years was a central participant with her perceptive opinions and sharp mind during long evenings of conversation and laughter. The group's last meeting was the spring of 2019. Helen was there. She was living at the Cupola at the time. I've been thinking a lot about Helen lately, particularly with the 20th anniversary of 9/11 coming up next week. I have striking memories of Helen and a trip we took together. It was her idea in response to our mutual need to pay some sort of homage to the pain in Ridgewood because of the fall of the towers. She suggested we go to the site as soon as the public was allowed to go. She brought the flowers, I drove, and we walked hand in hand from the parked car through downtown Manhattan, where the storefronts were filled with white dust, to the cordoned off area around the monstrous smoking rubble. Lots of others were there too, and police escorted you to the fencing so that you can leave flowers or put notes up. It was a powerful and almost traumatic experience for us both, but one that I treasure for having shared it with Helen. I remember we drove home pretty much in silence, but having shared that moment was extremely bonding experience. I miss Helen deeply. We last visited with her on her last birthday in August, and her sons arranged for us to have some time with her where we could have lunch. And it was like old times with her, lots of talk and laughter, and a treasured moment. The world is changing dramatically before our eyes, and I wish she was still with us, because she would bring her kindness and her caring, her sharp intelligence, her common sense to the times ahead. We miss you, Helen.
You all have heard quite a bit about my mother's life. But one thing that stands out for me in a certain way is that she thought that she couldn't sing. And this was a strange thing because she married a trombonist. She traveled with him to China, where he played in a trombone choir. He played trombone 3 nights a week. He played Duke Ellington until you couldn't listen anymore, which was totally fine with her, but she didn't understand it, or so she thought. She also gave birth to me, who became a musician, so it became even more perplexing in a way. She said, when I asked her about it, that it had to do with her upbringing. She was in school and in New England, where she went to school at the time, the mores were such that they were very strict about who really could sing and who couldn't sing. It was very rule-based, and she tried out for some singing. She was told in no uncertain terms, don't do this. And I would say, Mom, you know how to sing. Everybody knows how to sing. See, I can't carry a tune. But then towards the end of her life, she told me this story. She said when she was a young girl during the Depression, there was some neighbor girl about her age who had some kind of disability. There was not really a name for it, but she wasn't able to participate in things really. And this neighbor girl taught my mother how to sing "You Are My Sunshine." And my mom remembered how to sing "You Are My Sunshine" when she was 96 years old. She sang it on the phone with me. I sang it back. I said, Mom, you know how to sing. You did it. So we would sing You Are My Sunshine. So to close out our personal reflections today, for those of you who feel like you know how to sing, and for those who think you may not know how to sing, I would like to have a sing-along of the first verse of You Are My Sunshine. And I think the words are pretty well known. If anyone doesn't know them, you can raise your hand. I'll feed them to you. Okay, ready? All right. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. Thanks.
One thing I learned about, one of the things that's important to me is learning about things and being educated about them. And when I was a child, I thought that my parents thought politics was the most important thing. I think education is the most important thing. And they did too. They didn't even say it was so important. They talked about politics and they assumed education. It affected my life a lot because it was what I've done is very fulfilling to me. It makes me, well, that's the word for it, I guess. I don't really go for, in my work, I really want systemic change, not, what do they call it, hands-on, where you go down to the soup kitchen and help because they need soup. And that's important. I think it's very important, and people want to do that more than they want to do systemic change. But I am more, what grabs me is how can we change this? And there are plenty of things that we need changing. So how does it affect me? I work with people who get interested in it too, and you know people better by working with them. You, I'm sure, do that. And then if you agree, it's so great to be working with people who agree. So I've made a lot of friends that way, and I bet you have too. And it affected my life also after Dad died, your grandfather died, because I was living alone. What do I do? I mean, life has changed. And how do you work it out? And a number of the people that were activists with me are now people who, maybe they're not specifically activists, but they're in the Unitarian Society, and one of them we call each other every day, and you can become friends that way, or not. And I don't know, you just make friends by the work you do, and they are very important to you. But the society is really important to me, because my immediate family, which is the most important thing to me, lives somewhere else and has their own lives. And so that's, that's the way it should be. But it also means that I have to create a life without them. I think I've done that. I'm content with it.
The family asked for an opportunity to open the floor to any of you who would like to share a brief memory or brief remarks for the family. We're going to try to do this both in person and on Zoom so that the folks joining by Zoom have an opportunity as well. So if you are here in the room with us and want to make a comment or share a memory, we're going to ask you to line up distanced from each other over by this standing microphone. So you can make your way there. If you are on Zoom and you would like to share a memory or a remark, we're asking you to just raise your hand so that our Zoom tech can scan through the gallery and spotlight you and unmute you so that you can share. Again, we're asking for these to be brief. We're going to keep this to a 10-minute window. So we're going to start on Zoom, Olas, if there's.
I will keep my eyes open. I don't see any hands at this time. I will keep my
Jane
eyes
Weber did the virtual hand. Can you unmute?
Oh.
Spotlight Jane. Yeah.
Jane Weber.
You see? Right. Can you unmute Jane, Ola? Hold on. One of us can do it. Hold on.
I'm asking to unmute.
Jane, can you click yes to the request to unmute?
There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to offer a little bit different perspective. And for those who don't know you, my growing up name was Chandler. I'm one of the Chandler clan, and I'm the youngest and was very good friends growing up with Jack, and spent a lot of time. My perspective of Helen for many years, or started out, was, she was the mother who disciplined Jack and I when we got into all kinds of trouble. And she was always just so wonderful and kind about it. The other thing, I remember as a child hearing our moms talk. They were very close. And of course, my dad was Bob Chandler. And so in remembering Helen these last few weeks, one funny memory I always had was our mom saying, well, my Bob and my Bob. And it was just kind of a funny thing. I remember having that memory as a child about, that there could actually be another man besides my dad named Bob. And lastly, I'm really struck by when Rob shared about the dogs and connection. Of course, I remember one of the family Cocker Spaniels named Jessie, who I actually took care of at one point. But I'm just struck how, she gave to her activism and to all of us and the world just unconditionally, like a dog, and asking for nothing really in return. And that is a big takeaway for me, how I would like to carry myself forward in Helen's honor, focusing on unconditional love in activism and in general. Anyway, that's enough. Thank you. I will miss her.
Thank you, Jane. Olas, can you see anyone else online?
I do not see anyone else online.
So anyone in this space? Come right on over. Rob, can you switch our camera view? Thanks.
Hi, excuse me. My name is Barbara Muller, and I have known Helen because my own mother was Helen. They were tennis buddies back in the day when I was 5 years old playing in the sandbox. And many, many years later, was playing at Upper Ridgewood one day, and Helen said to me, "Barbara, could you come here for a minute?" And I was sure that she probably wanted to remember what somebody's name was. And she said, "We'd like to know if you'd like to join our indoor tennis group." And I was so flattered because they were like the best players in the club. So for many, many years, we played tennis together. So I have a couple funnies for you that'll make you smile. The second of which, through that tennis group, by the way, I met Sarah Lambert. Helen had asked me, could she be a guest in our group one day? And she did, and then she came here. And I guess most of you know Sarah. I've been in touch with her recently about all of this, but it was great to meet Sarah through Helen, and Sarah actually handled a funeral for me when I didn't know who else to call. So that connection was through Helen. The third thing, I remember thinking it was funny that she had a peace sign button on her tennis bag. And I always thought that was like funny because here was this woman with silver hair with a peace sign on her tennis bag. She's probably still got it. She said to me one day regarding brushing my teeth, "You don't leave the water running when you brush your teeth, do you?" And I never have again. Not only do I never leave the water running when I brush my teeth, I think of her every single morning. And I don't know whether it's been 20, 30, 40 years. For a long time, I've saved thousands of gallons of water, a la turning off that water. And please make sure you do the same. You're all going to think of Helen when you brush your teeth tomorrow. One day when we were leaving our indoor tennis game, she said to me, "How come you're not coming to my party?" And I said, "Helen, I don't know what you're talking about." "Well, yes, you do. You received an invitation." I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." So when I got home from tennis, I got a phone call from someone here, and she said, "I'm sorry if you didn't get the invitation. We're having an event for Helen here." And it was the only other time I've ever been in this building. And it was such a lovely affair to meet Helen's boys, who I'd heard about over the years, and hear all those great stories about her and her activism and so forth. I didn't know any of that. At that event, I met John. And I went over to him and said, "I guess I met all three of you," but I went over to John and I said, "Did your mother ever work?" Because some of the gals at my table asked me that question, and he said, "My mother never got paid for work, but she left the house every morning." And I'll never forget him saying that to me. I played tennis with her all the time. As she aged and felt less of a player, she used to say, "Barbara, I want to play with you in the third set." And we often did that. And so as I would approach the net, if I missed a shot or whatever, she would say to me, and you're all going to laugh when I say this, "You want to win, don't you?" And I still think of it. I say it sometimes to people, and I say, "Well, you know what Helen Lindsay would have said to me right then." So I'm a single woman. I'm a phys ed teacher. She inspired me and continues to and will continue to. And so many of the things I just heard made me laugh, to myself in the back. I have 3 pages of notes. I'm going to type them up and send them to my friends who know Helen Lindsay. So thanks for having this wonderful event. It's so wonderful to honor somebody like her who's done so much for so many, even though they don't know it. Thank you.
I am Sarah Poland. Aunt Helen is my aunt. My father is her sister. And I just want to say, today, the common thread with her family and her sons and her son-in-law and her grandchildren is that she always gave such a sense of calm. She gave me such a sense of calm and acceptance and love. And whenever I would go to visit her, when I was on my way up to Maine, I always came away with such a feeling of well-being and calmness. And I see that so much in her sons. And I see that so much in her grandchildren. It's just a wonderful sense of peace that I get from being with her family.
I'm Christian Reinhardt, and as we all know, Helen had 3 sons. But most of you know that she has a big group of her boys. And I feel very privileged and grateful to be one of her boys. Helen and me work on marriage equality issues here in a Unitarian society. And she was one of the main organizers for a wedding on the first day when the law provided the opportunity to get married for the gay men. It was a crazy day with running back and forth to Village Hall to get the permit, go to Hackensack in front of the judge to get the permit. And the judge in Bergen County refused to waive the rights for 72 hours. So, but fortunately we were married before in Connecticut. So the judge said, do you have a proof? We said, yes. And Helen was here with a huge group of our members of the society and organized a beautiful wedding, which we will never forget. As being one of her boys, I have another memory. When we had friends visiting from Europe, we invited Helen over for dinner and we had a lot of fun. There was another gay couple and Luca and Yaka. And by the end of the dinner, Helen said, you'll always be my boys. I mean, you just got part of my group of boys that I love. And for me, I will miss Helen always. She'll always live in my heart, but she'll always be my girl as well.
Hi, I'm Susan Poland. I'm one of Sherman's daughters. And what I'd like to say is thank you to Helen for a few things. One is for our boy cousins. There are 4 girls in my family. Sherman had 4 daughters and Helen had 3 sons. And this was quite an occasion in my family when the boys would come down to Bethesda or on our way, if we were being driven by my dad on our way to Maine, we would descend, all 4 girls, with their 3 sons. And they were one of the joys of my childhood was playing with the 3 boys. So I wanted to thank Helen for them. I'd also like to thank her for breaking in our dad so that he could be a father for 4 girls. And also to remember that Helen was very much like her own mother, whom I knew and who passed away when I was 13, in the sense of her kindness, her enthusiasm for daily life and for the experiences of children. And just thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Patterson. Carol and I have been members of the society since the 70s. But before that, there was a connection. Where's Jack? Carol taught Jack in 3rd grade. And she has some papers she wants to show you that he handed in. So we had a prior connection and we joined the society. The Lindsays, Bob and Helen, just welcomed us. It was so warm and friendly and nice. And I was new to Unitarianism and humanism. And I thought, I'm in. If this is the kind of people, I'm proud to be here. I asked Helen one time, we were walking actually down the Jersey Shore, and I said, Helen, how did you and Bob meet? And she said, well, we met in Massachusetts at Harvard. I said, so everything clicked. He's from South Carolina, you're from Massachusetts. And she said, I checked him out. I said, what do you mean? She said, he said he was a Democrat, but there are different Democrats in South Carolina. She vetted him. I thought, my God, what'd you do? Give him a multiple choice test or something? It was such a wonderful relationship. And it was so warm to watch. I was playing tennis with Helen one time, and she's good. She was good. And she moved around the court really well. Afterwards, I said, Helen, you've got great legs. And she looked up and said, I do have great legs. That was Helen. Lastly, I asked her one time, how did you end up in Ridgewood? And she said, because there's a tree commission. Oh, I said, wow, that sells it right there. We got trees here. But Helen, one time I was working with her, I was treasurer, she was president in the 80s. And I did the pledge drive, and I walked up to her one time and I said, Helen, we got this enormous pledge from so-and-so. And she said, oh, and I told her what it was. I said, I'm really surprised. And she said, Mike, they're rolling in it. Don't worry about it. And it really stuck with me because just like brushing your teeth, every time I saw those folks, I thought, oh, you're rolling in it. Ellen had a wonderful sense of humor. And I always appreciated that. And working with her and the ins and outs of the society was so pleasurable. And she was so constructive and helpful and warm. And she had that smile. And I loved that dry sense of humor. There was only one Helen. And like I said in the beginning, Bob and her were a wonderful duo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Obviously, there'll be time to share stories and memories as we gather outside after the service. I mentioned that Helen was clear with me when I arrived that she was an atheist, a humanist, and not someone who was going to need prayer or even necessarily pastoral care. But Helen and I did have some good chats, and I knew Helen to be someone who respected others, believed in other folks' right to have their minds and hearts and bodies nourished in the way that made sense for them. So this afternoon, we will not speak words of prayer, but we will enter into a time of quiet together that enables each of us to do what our spirits need. Perhaps that is closing your eyes and picturing Helen's face, remembering a special moment shared together, saying the prayers your heart is called to, or silently offering gratitude for all the amazing justice work she did. Or maybe it's just breathing and letting love for her fill your being. However we each spend this moment of silence, we spend it together, affirming the value of community, a value that Helen understood so well. Death is never easy, even when it comes at the end of a long life well lived. Helen lived for nearly a century, and she made the most of that time. She had no regrets. She loved her husband, her children, her grandchildren. She loved her communities, and she loved doing the work she did to make this world better. She understood that her life, though finite, could be powerful indeed. She was a woman of intelligence, character, and commitment. Every time you speak Helen's name, tell stories about her activism, have a great game out on the tennis court, read a book that inspires you, or do the deeply committed work of building community, you will ensure that Helen's memory lives on. Every time you remember her and tell her story, Helen lives. Love given and received never dies. That's a simple truth we know. May we each remember it every day of our lives. And may all our days be filled with justice, love, and a commitment to making the most of our brief time on earth so that we, at the end, know that we have no regrets. We extinguish our chalice today, but not the remembered light of Helen's life, not our hope for the future, and not the power of love. These, like Helen's legacy, burn on and can never be extinguished. Please join in the words in your order of service. We extinguish this flame. Friends, thank you for joining us today. If you are here in person, you are invited outside. There is a tent for a reception for sharing and remembering Helen. You can make your way there now. We're not doing a receiving line just for safety and traffic flow purposes, so you can just make your way to the outside. If you are on with us on Zoom, we invite you to take a moment before you log out to write into the chat. The chat will be saved for the family, so you can leave messages of love or memories in there before you exit the Zoom room. Thank you for being with us.